Hey everyone. So in this video, I'm going to go over the PowerPoint and handout on the APA format basics pretty much. This is going to be our introduction into APA format. And right now I'm just going over sort of what APA is and a general idea of what it entails. Okay, so first things first, let's share the screen. And I'm going to be going back and forth between the PowerPoint and the handout, the sample essay. So I'm going to leave the PowerPoint here in this view instead of the slideshow view because I'm going to have to keep going back out of it anyway. So once again, APA format basics, what you need to know. All right, so first, what is APA format? Well, APA stands for American Psychological Association. It refers to a specific way of designing an essay, and it also refers to how your research sources are presented throughout the essay. Okay, there are other formats that you can choose to write with. MLA is another very popular one. Chicago is a pretty popular one. But APA is commonly used in social sciences, physical sciences, medical fields, and technical fields. All right. The reason that those fields tend to use APA format is because the way that you cite your sources, and we're going to talk all about citations in another lesson, but the way that you cite your sources includes the year of publication. So like when you're reading an article and you see those parentheses, and it often has an author's last name, comma, and a year, that year is the year that that source was published, and it shows your reader, hopefully, that you're using current up-to-date sources. And for fields like the social sciences, physical sciences, medical fields, and technical fields, information is continually being gathered and things are changing fairly often. So you want to make sure that you're using current up-to-date sources, and you want your reader to know that right away as they're reading through your paper. So that's the main reason why you're mostly required to use APA format when you write. It's really not much different than MLA or Chicago. There are some minor design differences, but otherwise, you always have to cite your sources, whether it's in MLA or Chicago or APA. You always have to give credit to your sources. What goes in the citation inside the parentheses is a little different depending on which format you're using, but once you understand how APA functions, knowing what to put in those parentheses becomes pretty easy. And again, we're going to have a whole lesson just on citations this week as well, so we will come back to that, but that was just sort of a way of explaining why we use APA format, why it's so important for you to learn. Okay? Don't be afraid of APA format. No one expects you to memorize all of it. That's crazy. The trick is to have a general understanding of what it is, what it basically consists of, and then knowing where to go to find answers to questions that you have about it. So when you're writing a paper in APA format, you know it's supposed to have certain things. Now, you might not remember the specific details of those things, but if you know where to go to find out, it becomes pretty easy. Now, if you happen to go further in your education, perhaps like to a bachelor's level program, then it's very possible that you might be using APA format on a regular enough basis that you actually will start to remember some of the things associated with APA format. But you're not expected to memorize it. You don't have to memorize it. You just have to know the basics of it and then where to go to find what you need, right? So this lesson is going to give you that general understanding and provide you with some additional resources where you can go to look for things. And we're also going to break down, um, especially sort of the reference entries and the citations in 2 other lessons this week, right? So we're going to go through these slides here to just get a very basic general understanding of APA format. All right. So next slide. Next slide is actually a note. So if you have learned about APA format in the past, it is very likely that you learned elements from the 6th edition of the APA Style Guide. But APA published the 7th edition of the Style Guide in the fall of 2019. And there are some slight differences between the 6th and 7th editions. What we're going to be learning in this course is all from the 7th edition. Some instructors might still use the 6th edition formatting rules. So keep that in mind. I'm going to show you on apa.org where you can go to sort of see what the 6th edition of the Style Guide is all about, just in case you ever need it. But, you know, what I would do is if you're being asked to do something in APA format, ask the instructor, you know, say, you know, I learned APA format according to the newest 7th edition. Is that okay? Can I go ahead and use what I learned about the 7th edition? I'm sure they're going to be fine with it, even if they aren't totally familiar with it yet themselves. But it's still such a new edition. The 7th one is that I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware. I'm teaching you from the 7th edition, the most recent one. All right. Now, another note is that the 7th edition of the APA Format Style Guide lists different requirements for student submissions versus professional submissions that are intended for publication. So we're going to be learning about the requirements for student submissions. If you need to know what the requirements are for a piece that's intended for publication, you can go to apa.org for that as well. But obviously, we're in an academic setting, so I'm going to teach you what the requirements are for student submissions. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So APA format comes down to sort of 2 things, like I said, design elements and how we handle source information. So we're going to look at the design elements first. Those design elements are margins, spacing, font, page numbers, title page, headings and subheadings, and the references page. Right? Notice that in that list, there's no abstract mentioned. Some of you may have already had to do APA papers in the past, and you were required to have an abstract as page 2 of your essay. And an abstract is just a very brief paragraph that sort of explains what the essay is all about, what the paper is all about. Now, according to the 7th edition, student submissions do not require an abstract. So I'm not going to be teaching you about those. However, again, you can go to apa.org or any number of websites, YouTube videos, to learn more about what an abstract is if you still have an instructor who is going off the 6th edition and is requiring an abstract. Okay. All right. So some of those design elements that were listed: margins. You need a 1-inch margin on all sides of the paper. If you're working in Microsoft Word, it should be the default margins. So you really shouldn't have to change that or worry about it. But just, in case you're using some other type of program, it should be a 1-inch margin on all sides. Spacing. The entire document should be double spaced from start to finish, the whole thing double spaced. And make sure it's truly double spaced, that you know how to go up to the paragraph box and choose the line and paragraph spacing and choose 2.0. Double spacing does not mean hitting enter twice in between each line of text. That's not right, and it actually messes up some of the other formatting elements. Another thing about the spacing is that there should be no extra spaces anywhere. No extra spaces between paragraphs, no extra spaces between sections, no extra spaces between reference entries. The whole thing is double spaced, but there are no extra spaces. Font. All right, so many instructors will probably still require Times New Roman 12-point font. Some might also allow Arial, 11 or 12-point font, or Calibri 11-point font. The true requirement now, though, is much more inclusive because there's so many different, word processing programs now that APA sort of allows for a variety of fonts, but they do recommend that you use a sans serif font, such as Calibri, Arial, or Lucida Sans. If you're going to use a serif font, it needs to be Times New Roman, Georgia, something like that. And if you're not sure what we mean by sans serif and serif, you can look that up if you want. But I think it's pretty safe to just go with the default of your program. If you're using an older version of Microsoft Word, it would be Times New Roman 12-point font. If you're using the newer versions of Microsoft Word, it'll be Calibri 11-point font. If you really like Arial or the instructor prefers Arial, go with that and ask if it needs to be 11 or 12. All right. The most important rule to follow with font, though, is that you need to choose a legible, reader-friendly font style and size. You don't want it to be too small and you don't want it to be too big. You need it to look like type, not handwriting or anything like that. It needs to be easy to read. And it needs to be consistent throughout the entire document. No changing of fonts. Okay? All right. The next design element are page numbers. You got to have page numbers in the top right corner of your header. Just the page number. Not your name, not any other words or anything else with the number, just the page number in the top right corner of the header. The title page should be numbered as page 1, and if you set up the page numbers right, it will automatically put the page number, the correct page number, on all subsequent pages. The reference page also gets page numbers. Okay. Then we have the title page. So the title page, first page of the document, your title you'll probably hit enter 3 or 4 times from the top of the document, and you want to be centered. Everything in the title page is centered. And you'll type the title of your paper centered in bold. Then you'll hit enter 2 times. Or 1 time. No, you'll hit enter 2 times to put your name centered, not bold. Hit enter once. Under that, your affiliation or your school's name centered, not bold. Hit enter 1 time. The course number and name, hit enter another time. The instructor's name, hit enter 1 more time, and the assignment due date, right? So we're going to look at a sample APA essay to see what all of that is supposed to look like. But those are sort of the exact rules for how to format that title page. We also have headings and subheadings. You're not always going to be required to use headings and subheadings when you write a paper in APA format, but sometimes even if you're not required to, it's nice to go ahead and use them because it helps to visually structure the main sections of your essay. And this is all really kind of confusing, you know. There's 5 heading systems, there's, you know, 5 levels, so to speak. So the first level, which would be like your first section, would be centered, boldface, and title case heading. If you have a subsection, then you go to level 2. It goes over to the left side, boldface, title case heading, what have you. And then if you have a subsection of that, then it changes a little bit. Again, we're going to look at a sample essay to see what all of this looks like. But I would imagine if you do use headings and subheadings, you probably won't go past level 1 and level 2, maybe level 3, but probably not. But again, we're going to look at a sample essay that has some headings and subheadings. So we'll see how it looks, what this means to follow these rules. We'll see what it actually looks like. All right. The last design element is the references page, right? Where is it located? It is located on the page immediately following your conclusion. It still requires a page number, just like all the other pages. So let's say, for instance, that your concluding paragraph starts at the bottom of page 6 and finishes at the top of page 7, but there's only like 2 or 3 sentences at the top of page 7 that's the last part of your conclusion, and you have all that extra space on page 7. You leave it blank. Your references page would start on page 8, right? That's the only time that there would be any kind of extra space in the essay. Just know, though, that otherwise there's no extra spaces, but if you're on your last page and you have extra space, you leave it blank and you start your reference page on the next page of the document. How is it formatted? You're going to have the word references centered at the top of the page. It's still going to be double spaced, just like the rest of the document. There are no extra spaces between entries. Everything on the reference page, all of the entries are listed alphabetically according to the first word of each entry. Any entry that uses more than 1 line of text gets what we call a hanging indent. And again, we're going to look. We're going to look today in this video at what that all means, what that all looks like. And then there's also another lesson where we're going to look specifically at reference entries and the reference page, right? What does the references page contain? It is a list of all sources that are used and referred to in the essay. So every source that you use or refer to in the essay must appear on the references page. Every source that's listed on the references page must be cited at least once in the essay. So if you have a source on your reference list and I don't see a citation anywhere in the essay for that source, then that means you either forgot to include the citation whenever you did use material from that source, or you listed it on the reference page but didn't actually use anything from it. And if that's the case, it doesn't belong on the references page at all. So every source that gets referred to and cited in the essay has to be on your references page, and every source that's on your references page must be used at least once. There must be at least 1 citation in the essay, right? The reference entry contains the full source reference information, not just the author and the year of publication, but the full title. If it was a journal article, it will have the title of the article plus the title of the journal, possibly a volume and issue number, possibly a page range, the publisher if it's a book. It gives the reader all the information they need to go find that source themselves if they would like to also read it. Different types of sources require different formatting for its entry on the reference page. We're going to look at that in the next lesson this week. All right. The first word of the entry, or maybe the first couple words if it's a title, the first word of the entry will match up with what's in the parentheses of your in-text citation. So most entries will begin with the author's last name. Most of the time our sources have an author, whether it's a person or an organization. Let's say that the author's last name is Smith. That's what's going to begin that reference entry on your reference page. So Smith, J, and then the year of publication, and then the title and the publisher, perhaps if it's a book, or the URL if it was something that you found online. But the entry starts with that author's last name. Therefore, the author's last name is what you put in parentheses when you cite that source in the essay. If there's not an author for that particular source, the entry will begin with something else, probably the title. Whatever that title is, that's what will go in the parentheses when you cite that source in the essay. So that when I see that citation and I see whatever you've put in parentheses, I can come to your reference page and easily find that source because that's how the entry will begin as well. I don't have to search all through the entries to try to find that bit of information. It is how the entry begins. They match up. So it actually makes more sense to create all of the reference entries first, so that way you know what is supposed to go in the parentheses for your citation. You just look at whatever it begins with, that's what you're going to put in the parentheses. We're going to talk more about the entries and the citations in the next two lessons. But that's what they are. That's how they work together, right? Now, about those citations, you can use information from a source in three ways, right? You can summarize the whole source or part of the source. You can paraphrase, and you can use a direct quote. No matter how you use the source information, no matter how you incorporate it into your essay, you must always provide a citation in that exact spot of the essay. Not at the end of the paragraph, not a few sentences later, but immediately. As soon as you have referred to information from a source, there should be a set of parentheses with the citation for that source. No matter if you have summarized it, no matter if you've paraphrased it and put it in your own words, no matter if you have taken a direct quote word for word from the source. Any and every time you have used information in any way at all, the citation must be there and it should appear immediately. Again, the citations are the parentheses that you see, right? So you've seen them used. If you haven't really used them yet yourself, you've seen them used. You have read plenty of things where the author has used information from a source and you'll suddenly see a set of parentheses and it will probably have a name, a comma, and a year. That's a citation. That's what we mean when we talk about citations. We provide citations for two main reasons. First is to let the reader know that that information is from a source and not your own original ideas and words. It's giving credit where credit is due and not trying to pass it off as your own. We do it to avoid being accused of plagiarism. The second reason we provide the citation and the way we provide it is so the reader can see that citation and then go to your reference page and easily find that source and get all the other information they need about that source to then go find it and read it themselves. Right? So we've already kind of talked a little bit about what's on this slide. Once again, we're going to talk much more in depth about citations in another lesson this week. But just remember to keep track of where you have incorporated source information. Even if you don't know how to do the citation correctly right away, do something. Put something there so that you remember that that information came from a source. At least then you'll remember where it is in the essay. So when you do figure out what should go in the parentheses, you'll know exactly where to go to fix it, to put the right thing in parentheses. And at the very least, you can't be accused of plagiarism at that point because you are trying to give credit to that source. It just might not be formatted correctly. And that's much easier to deal with and fix than being accused of plagiarism and trying to pass something off as your own. But that's, again, that tip there on this slide at the bottom. That is why I strongly advise to create your reference entries first. It doesn't have to be on the actual references page of the essay yet. You can have a whole separate file where, or even handwritten, where you're keeping track of each source you're using and creating the reference entry, just like we learned about last week, and how to get started with research and keeping track of your sources. But if you at least have the reference entry done, then you'll know what should go in the parentheses for your citations. So take that advice to heart, because it really can save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration. How much easier would it be to start writing the essay, to start writing your rough draft, and every time you take information from a source in some way, you know, all you got to do is look right there, and you'll know what to put in the citation. It helps. It really does. All right, so again, APA is just one way of formatting. We're really just talking about design elements and how we show our sources. Don't let it intimidate you. You don't have to memorize it. And just know where to go if you have questions or need help. We're going to talk about a couple of websites in a couple of the next lessons, but two that I think are really good are the Purdue Online Writing Lab, the Purdue OWL, O-W-L, and APA.org. Go straight to the organization that creates APA style. They have a wealth of information and explanation and examples and tutorials that will answer any question you have about APA format. We're going to look at that site a little bit in one of the next lessons. Right now, though, what I want to do is I want to show you an actual sample essay so we can see some of these things we just talked about. All right, so Margins, again, if you're working with Microsoft Word, you should automatically get those 1-inch margins. But if we scroll down here, this is what we need, like 1 inch here, 1 inch here, 1 inch here, and 1 inch here, right? The spacing, notice how even the title page right here, everything's double spaced. Come down, everything is double spaced. Look, all through, double spaced, double spaced. And let's get down to the references page. And oh look, double spaced. The whole thing from start to finish. Notice how there are no extra spaces. Here on the references page, there's no extra space between the entries, right? Going back up, you know, we have subsections here. There's no extra spacing. Even here, the previous section, and here's our new section. There's no extra spaces anywhere. Going all the way back up to the top of page 2, where the essay actually begins. This is the title, and then immediately after it, the introductory paragraph begins. No extra space. There are no extra spaces at all, right? The font, you can see this one is Calibri 11. Again, just remember those pointers about what type of fonts are best to use. It's very likely that your instructor will tell you what font to use, but if not, maybe just ask, just to be on the safe side, what you should use, what they prefer. Page numbers, remember, we're up here in the header, right? So this is the header up here, right? So we have a page number here. The way that you do that is over here, page number. Get a drop-down menu. You want it on the top of the page. It's going to take a minute to think here. And you want it over in the right-hand corner. So you're going to choose plain number 3. And that'll do it for you. Make sure that you don't have this marked, different first page. If you mark that with a check, then the page number won't show up on page 1, on the title page. This will still be page 2, like it's supposed to be. It won't make this page 1, but you just won't see the 1 up here like you're supposed to if you have this checked, different first page. So make sure it is not checked, right? If you do that, then it will automatically paginate each subsequent page of the document. You don't have to worry about it after that. It does it automatically. So the title page. So remember we said that, you know, you're gonna start at the top here and hit enter like 3 or 4 times, right? Come down to this line, that's where that'll take you if you hit enter that many times. And then you're gonna go to center up here in the paragraph box, and you're gonna type your title in bold. After you get finished typing it, you're gonna hit enter 2 times, and that'll bring you down here. Make sure you get out of bold if it's still in it when you get there. And you're going to type your name, enter once, your school's name, enter once, the course that the paper is for, the instructor that the paper is for, and the due date of the paper. The only thing in bold is the title. Okay. So we talked also about headings and subheadings. The first heading is the title of the paper. So it will be centered and in bold, just like it was up here on the title page, but it's going to be on the very first line of text. So this title is Guided Imagery and Progressive Muscle Relaxation in Group Psychotherapy. After you type the title and your cursor's right there, you'll hit enter 1 time, right? And then make sure that you get out of center and over to align left. And you immediately hit tab to indent the start of your introductory paragraph, and you start typing, right? This particular essay required 3 paragraphs as an introduction, and that happens sometimes. Sometimes your introduction is more than 1 paragraph. The first section of this essay is about guided imagery. So again, it's centered and in bold. No extra spaces before or after it. And then it has, this first section has 2 subsections. So the first subsection is called Features of Guided Imagery. And the title of this subsection comes all the way back out to the left margin, and it's in bold. And then she types everything about that little subsection. And then the next subsection in guided imagery is guided imagery in group psychotherapy. And again, it's over back here at the left margin and in bold. Then you'll see the next section, progressive muscle relaxation, is centered because we've moved to the next big section. And then this one also has 2 subsections, features of progressive muscle relaxation, over at the left margin in bold, progressive muscle relaxation in group psychotherapy, over at the left margin and in bold. And then we come down, we have the third section, guided imagery and progressive muscle relaxation in group psychotherapy. This section does not have any subsections. It's just this paragraph. So we don't see any of those subsection headings over here on the left side. She didn't need them. And then we move to the last section, which is the conclusion. And the conclusion is broken up into 2 smaller sections, limitations of existing research and directions for future research. Look, we end our concluding paragraph, the end of our conclusion, at the top of page 9, and we scroll all the way down because our references page starts on a new page, even though we have all this extra white page up here. Doesn't matter. References page starts on a new page. The word references is centered and in bold. After that, you're going to hit enter 1 time, and then make sure you come back out to a line left, and you will immediately have your first entry. Then your second entry. And look, this one right here took up 2 lines of text, so we have a hanging indent right here. It's kind of like the opposite of a paragraph. You know, when we start a paragraph, we're usually here at the left margin and we hit tab and it takes us in. But the rest of the paragraph, all the lines come back out here to the left. With your reference entries, it's the exact opposite. The first line starts over here at the left, and any additional lines are indented, right? So like this entry right here was only 1 line of text, so that's all it took. This next one was 2 lines, so the second line is indented. This one has 3 lines, so 2 and 3 are indented. Keep that in mind, hanging indent for any entry that has 2 or more lines of text. Look at how they are listed. Alphabetically according to the first word of the entry. And most of these begin with authors' last names, right? Achterberg. Now, American Psychological Association, that's not a person's name, it's a group, an organization, but they are still the ones who wrote it, right? We have Bader, Ball, Bernstein, Bottomley, Cohen, Cunningham, and then, but look at this, Freebird Meditations. Again, that's another group, right? So, but doesn't matter if it's a group or a person. I don't know if we have, this one does not have any sources without an author, but we'll be looking at that in one of the next lessons. But everything is listed alphabetically according to the first word, right? Notice too that this reference list took up 3 pages and we only have the word references on the first page of the reference list, right? So when we get to page 11, we don't see the word references again up here. We just continue with the list. Let's look back up here at citations because we talked about citations, right? So go back up to the beginning. All right, so we're here at the start of the essay, and it says a majority of Americans experience stress in their daily lives. And then we have these parentheses, American Psychological Association, 2017. That tells me that this information came from this source. How did we know what to put in the parentheses? Well, because that is how that source entry starts on the reference page. They all match up. Let's see. Here we have 2 techniques that have been associated with reduced stress and increased relaxation in psychotherapy contexts are guided imagery and progressive muscle relaxation. Parenthesis, McGuigan and Lehrer, 2007. So that tells us that something within this sentence came from this source. Immediately. We didn't come down here and do it. It's immediately. As soon as we referred to that information, citation. How did we know what to put in the parentheses? Well, because those are the author's names. That's what starts the entry. This happens to have 2 authors, so we put both authors' names in the parentheses, McGuigan and Lehrer. You can see then how if you have this already completed, how much easier it makes it to know what to put in the parentheses when it's time to include a citation. Really save so much time and aggravation. It helps you be more confident in what you're supposed to put in the citation. Notice too that source that we just looked at here, 2 techniques that have been associated right here. Notice there's no quotation marks. That means that this source has been paraphrased. The author put it into her own words. And if we were to look at this source by McGuigan and Lehrer, we would not find anything that looked exactly like this. We would find the information for sure, because she's telling us the information came from this source. But we would not find anything that looked exactly like this, or even super close to this. This citation and no quotation marks tells us that she is expressing the same idea, the same information in a totally different way. She has completely turned it into her own phrasing. She's not giving them credit for how the information is being stated. She is simply giving them credit for providing the information. All right. But you can see, all of these citations here, there are several along the way in each paragraph, because she's providing the citation as soon as she uses information from that source, every time. It doesn't matter which one we look at either. What goes in the parentheses will match up exactly with how that entry begins. What do we have here? Of course, Scobolt and Towing. It's going to be exactly how it appears on the reference entry. Let's go down alphabetical order. Makes it really easy to try to find it. There it is. See how easy that is? See how easy it is to find the source you're looking for, because what's in the parentheses matches up with the beginning of the entry, and all the entries are listed alphabetically. It's really just ease of access. That's what determines what goes in the citation. That's why the sources are listed alphabetically on the reference page. Ease of access. All right, so we are going to talk more in depth about how to create these reference entries, how to get them all on a page the right way. And then we're also going to look more about at how to create those citations the right way. But I think that's enough for now. If you have any questions, please reach out. But just remember also that there's a couple more lessons to come this week. So maybe get through all of them. And then if you still have, questions or you're confused about something, then reach out to me. But it's very possible that any questions you have now might get answered in one of the other two lessons. All right. But I'm always here if you need anything. Otherwise, you're free to go ahead and move on.